Well, hi YouTubers. I wanted to give you some of my impressions of my new Panasonic LX100. This camera's been on the market now for almost 2 years, but even still, it's one of the best options out there if you want a small camera that has a nice fast lens, shoots excellent 4K video, and doesn't overheat while doing it. This camera competes with the Sony RX100 Mark IV, the Mark III, you could argue, the Canon G7X Mark II, and a few others, but those are probably the main competitors. What sets this apart is it has a micro four thirds sensor, whereas the Sony and the Canon have 1-inch sensors. So what does that mean? Well, you have a bigger sensor, you're getting better low light performance, you're getting a slightly faster lens, very slightly faster, but still you're getting more subject isolation, a smaller depth of field. What's nice about this lens versus the one in the Sony starts out at 1.8 and ends up at 2.8 at the long end, but it drops off to 2.8 very quickly, whereas on this Panasonic, it's more of a gradual fall off in that maximum aperture. Let's go ahead and turn that on. Yeah, so something else that's nice about this, you get a dedicated aperture ring, which of course shows you what your f-stop is set at. On the Sony and the Canon, you have a ring around the lens that you can program for aperture, but you don't get the the physical markings shown. And on the back of the camera, you have an LCD that's a 921,000 dot VGA LCD, which is nice. It does have the LCD bonded to the glass, so you don't have that air gap. I have a glass screen protector on here as well. The viewfinder is actually a 1280 by 720. It's a 720p viewfinder. It is a field sequential unit, so when you're panning around, you'll see a little bit of the shimmering red, green, and blue on the edges. It's not a big deal. It is a very nice, big, bright, sharp viewfinder, but not well suited to action because of that field sequential LCD. Viewfinder in the GH4, which is a XGA resolution OLED, that would have been a much better pick for this camera, but maybe they did this to keep costs down. Maybe it was a size issue, I'm not sure, but very nice EVF, not the best, but not the worst. Up on the top of the camera, get a dedicated shutter speed dial, which is nice to have. The only downside of that is when you're switching from stills to video shooting, well, that's your video shutter speed as well, so you have to, okay, I'm in auto mode for stills, I have to go, if I'm shooting cinematic, go down to 60 and then use the dial to go to 1/50th of a second, and so it's a lot of dial twiddling going from still to video, but I guess there's really no way around that with the way this camera's laid out. Another problem is with the video, there's no video mode. You have a record button. So you hit this and then it punches in and starts recording. You don't really get a preview of that slight crop factor when you're framing your shot. You just kind of have to account for it. Also, the location of that button, it's kind of in a way where you can jerk the camera when you're starting and stopping it, so you want to allow yourself a second or two to kind of stabilize on either side of the clip. What else? If you've noticed, I have this Garrett's case. It's a nice half case. It has cutouts for the battery and the memory card, and that's a big selling point for me. The Panasonic branded half case, which has a top cover as well, it doesn't have that. You have to physically remove the case every time you change out the battery or the memory card, which for me would be too much of an inconvenience. This is a really nice case. It's very high quality leather. It even smells very high end. It looks great. Only downside is the price, $100. But it doesn't just protect the bottom of the camera, but it helps it feel better in hand. You have a little bit more of a grip to grip onto. And on the back of the camera, you get a little bit of relief here for the palm of your hand where your thumb sits. You're not smashing up against the button and the wheel. You have a little bit of gap because of this case protrusion. And this base kind of raises the camera up a little bit, which is nice because it gets your lens off the ground a little bit. Image quality is great. One disadvantage with these micro Four Thirds sensors, and correct me if I'm wrong, because but I think that even the new 20 megapixel micro Four Thirds sensor that replaced this 16, I think it has a base ISO of 200 instead of 100. And the problem with that is you get a little bit more shadow noise when you're raising the ISOs, when you're raising the shadows in Lightroom. But it's respectable. It's nothing like my Pentax K5 where you can just bring insane clean detail out of shadows. You get a little bit of leeway there, but it's about like what you'd have in a Canon APS-C DSLR versus a Nikon or Pentax or Sony, where you have cleaner shadows. I think that's an area where the new RX100 Mark IV is pretty much on par with this, despite a smaller sensor. They have that new stacked Exmor RS technology, so it might even have cleaner shadows than this when you push them. Other than that, though, I mean, you're getting a 12 megapixel image, but it's a very sharp 12 megapixel image. You don't have an anti-aliasing filter. When you crop into 100%, you're getting really nice, sharp pixel level detail. Noise performance is excellent, all the way up to 6400. And above that, if you're, doing small prints or black and white, it's fine. So this is really, all in all, one of the best low light handheld cameras out there, because you get that big sensor, you get a fast wide lens, you get really effective image stabilization, probably the best I've ever used in a compact camera. Yeah. All right, well, thanks for watching.